The following content is not intended as a substitute for professional legal advice, medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your attorney, advocate, physician, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding any medical or educational concerns.
Hello and welcome to Empower Dyslexia. I am Stephen Yearout. On this show, we are here to help you become a better partner in education. We talk about dyslexia and other related disorders. We talk about research. We talk about the interventions. We talk about special education policy on three different levels: the local level, the federal level, and the state level. We also interview experts in their field around dyslexia and the other related disorders that we face. The other great thing I think is always important is we talk to people about their experiences, their life experiences, and how they've made it through it. Make sure that you subscribe to us on Facebook, like us on and subscribe to us on YouTube. You can get all of our audio podcasts and all of our favorite apps here: Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify. Now we're on iHeartRadio. So you've got a plethora of great applications that you can get this information. So one of our sponsors, our title sponsor, is Learning Ally. And Learning Ally has actually given us our own discount code. So when you want to get a new family membership, you can use ED20 as a discount code when you're checking out, and you'll get 20% off your family membership. This is for new family membership orders. So go check out Learning Ally. They're a great resource for audiobooks. I am really excited that we have a special guest. He's in town for another event, and I was like, I'm going to steal him for the afternoon. So we really didn't prepare for the show. As soon as I sat down and talked with our guest, it was an instant connection. And I thought, this show, I just want to sit down and have a conversation. I just want to talk about our journey, because our journeys are very similar. I want to introduce Jake Sussman.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Stephen. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here, and you're absolutely right. You know, when we first sat down, there was so much connection and passion to this cause. And hello, everybody. It's nice to guess not see you, but that you're all here listening. And just a quick intro about me is I'm the author and writer of a poem called "The Forgotten Child," which went viral back in October on Facebook. That's dedicated to kids and those who have been misunderstood simply for the way they learn. And today I facilitate conversations around the country on behalf of kids who cannot articulate yet exactly how they're feeling and the way they learn, and being their advocate for them and for families that are struggling with LD. So I'm very happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to our spontaneous conversations.
Absolutely. So your poem that you wrote, when did you write that?
So I wrote this poem about 3 years ago. I was a junior in college at Roger Williams University. And what makes the story unique is that I wasn't supposed to be there. I was told when I was in middle school that I would never go to college by teachers. I was 3 grade levels behind in reading and being forced to read out loud in class. And it was a very, very traumatizing time of my life. And here I was, junior year of college, in a school without an academic support program, which we'll get into in a minute. But I wanted to share that this story, me being here, wasn't so easy. And it's not just my story, it's actually the story of so many others. And I decided the platform was going to be at a poetry slam, which, for those of you who don't know, it's a place where people can express in poetry, and it's a competition. Although I chose not to compete, I just wanted to share it with the community. And the feedback ever since has been absolutely off the charts. You know, it's touched over 500,000 people from around the world, and impacting more than I ever even thought possible. So, yeah.
Isn't it amazing how telling your story, not only is it freeing to tell your story, but how many people it touches, and they come up and are crying, and just, you're telling their story.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's the powerful piece about it is what happens with the emotional imagery that comes from hearing it. And I'd actually would love an opportunity to share
I would love
with
for
you, which
Yeah.
I think could lay a great foundation to the rest of our conversations.
Please.
Okay, let me just pull this up here. Okay. Give me 1 second.
I would say not only the emotional imagery,
Right.
but the emotional release.
Right. Right. You know, there's so much power in sharing, and we were just talking about that. And when you share, you actually feel this weight lifted off your shoulders, and you feel expressed, or at least heard, to someone that wants to listen. So here's the poem, and if you're watching this and you're driving, please pull over. You know, I want you to really take a minute, because I kindly ask you to shut your eyes.
Okay.
So you can fully understand the story that has left me so traumatized. Imagine yourself as the child that always smiled. You were wild, you were beguiled, until the day you were profiled. This is the story of the forgotten child. Now, what I am about to tell you will truly make your stomach churn, they said. I have made your concern, Mr. and Mrs., but your child simply can't learn. The child was labeled disabled. He was told face to face that he should stop his chase to a higher educational place because he couldn't read any book in the bookcase. This is an absolute disgrace. Those words should never come out of anyone with the knowledge base. From that point on, he was taken out of the classroom all day long, from homeroom to 3 hours past eating in the lunchroom. He became paranoid, full of anxiety and scared because he was told he was impaired. It felt like nobody cared. He was misunderstood as a result of educators thinking he was no good. He just needed someone to think that he could. You see, negative labels are destructive, they're counterproductive and obstructive. Now, I'd like to ask you to please open your eyes to some surprise. That forgotten child is standing before all of you guys. He defied the lies of this public educational enterprise. You see, what they didn't know was that this forgotten child had nothing but knowledge. He refused to acknowledge you will never go to college. He took those words and turned them from frustration into motivation. He was lacking that academic foundation, so his parents pulled him out of this cultivation they called public education. Let me bring something to rouse. Just imagine your academic journey into the construction of a house. Without the proper support, that house will fall short. He was finally put in a place where his mind was no longer a disgrace. It was a place that built his academic base as strong as an iron case. They saw him for everything he got. This isn't no school of thought. It is something that the public educational system simply did not. And it was the first time the forgotten child, actually smiled since the day he was profiled. Now, let me mention one of the most notable individuals in all of mankind, with a mind that was also defined like mine. Let's take someone like Albert Einstein, a man of credibility that had a learning disability. He was lacking much valuability despite educators' much acridity, but that didn't stop Al's life journey to discovering the theory of relativity. So take a minute while I spit some poetry. What's the difference between you and every person the eye can see? Truth is, there's nothing, because each and every one of us have our own unique ability. Einstein said it perfectly, that everybody is a genius. But if we judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life thinking that it is stupid. Don't you see? A wise man once told me that the power comes from the young people knowing that they can change the world. Don't ever give up your shot. Your minds are all you've got. It's time we change this public educational melting pot, turning your minds into a robot. You get my gist. In this world craving to coexist, it's time that we work with the kids that are missed, with those who fit the mainstream schools perfectly, and then those who learn differently. Together, I insist.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
I mean, really.
Thank you.
I mean, that sums up how kids feel.
Yeah. Now let me ask you, when you heard that, what was coming to your mind?
Well, it brings back memories of school.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about me walking through the elementary school where my kids went, that I actually went to, and how I could actually remember the faces and the places that things were said to me in that school.
Right.
And that's PTSD, or that's trauma.
Oh, yeah. You know, writing that, I'm telling you.
I would assume that there was lots of tears
Middle school
writing that poem.
Middle school was a time in my life that I shut out of my memory. Wiped. No memory. Because it was painful. Mm-hmm. Imagine you're in sixth grade, it's first semester, you're new to this whole new school, and everyone around you, it's like a highway, right? Everyone's going 50 miles an hour, you're going 25. You're still getting to the same place, but you're going much slower than everyone else. All your friends are getting ahead, and there you are going 25 miles an hour. And all you want to do is just be like everyone else, and your teachers are getting frustrated because all they see is a behavior problem.
They're not looking any deeper than the problem.
Correct. And that's when my parents were like, this is not a good place for Jake. I was full of fear, anxiety, and stress. How do you expect a child or anyone to want to learn anything new when they're full of fear, anxiety, and stress?
You can't.
You can't.
You absolutely cannot take in new information when you're in that state of mind.
Right. Right.
So it was interesting. You said in part of your poem, you talked about, I am the forgotten child. So we were talking about the discussion where I was having with a high school principal. And I said, as a high school principal, what were you taught about a child who has ADD, dyslexia, and drops out of school? And he goes, nothing good. And I said, you're looking at him. I said, that's why I fight so hard.
Yeah.
That's the reason why. That's the drive behind it. So to hear, I mean, when did you write this? You said
I wrote that probably 3 years ago.
So you're saying the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Everything that I've said when I go talk to principals and teachers and everything else was written in that poem.
Yeah.
I've said those exact same words. And it's the same thing that parents and students across this world have said.
Absolutely.
So my question is, when are people going to start listening?
I think, honestly, I think we're actually seeing a shift of people are beginning to listen. The non-physical disabilities. There's a whole world out there of people and realizing that we don't fit in cookie cutter education models. LD or not, everyone learns in a unique way. And when we realize and come to terms with that as artificial intelligence, technology, and, Alexas, right, are out there in our lifestyles, we have to keep a sense of who are we and what's our purpose. It's our imagination. That's your mind. And
Right.
everyone has a different mind. And I think people are starting to come to terms with that. And more of those who look at the world differently, AKA those who have LD, are the ones that the world's going to rely on one day, or not just one day, right now, to bring the change that we're looking for.
So let's talk a little bit about your childhood.
Sure.
When did you start seeing? When did you start noticing that you had a learning difference or learning disability, or you were struggling? Because back then, as a child, you don't know what it is. You just know that everybody else is doing something, and I'm just sitting here and I don't know why or how.
Yeah. Good question, by the way. Third grade, where independent reading, and I was being a behavior problem in class. Now, it's funny because, again, this was a part of my life this was the beginning of where I started to wipe out this memory, but I was reading report cards. The report card of my third grade year was actually horrifying to read. Now, what happened was that during independent reading time, I was expected to read just like everyone else, but no one knew that I'm an auditory learner. So what happened was that there was a 2-paragraph analysis of me, and 8 of those sentences talked about my behavioral problem during independent reading time with no solution. Jake needs to be more responsible for his behavior. How do you expect a third grader to be more responsible for their behavior? And looking back, we know why. If they put headphones on my ears, it would be a totally different experience. But at the same time, that's when the pain in my stomach started to develop. Whenever I would read, especially fiction books, because I hated fiction, I would get this pain in my stomach to the point where I would cry and I would get in a ball and not want to move or do anything. And it was awful to watch. My siblings shared it, my parents. And that was the beginning. But again, I mean, I didn't know why. That was just what was going on. I'm the oldest, so this was new for everybody. And socially too, like I wanted to fit in, but I didn't understand social cues very well. So my friends weren't patient with me, and I actually got along better with the parents at birthday parties than my own friends. I would find myself hanging out in the kitchen versus at the pool or the jumping house or whatever.
Right.
But looking back, I know why, because adults understood me better. They listened and they asked me questions instead of just judging or having to be like someone else that I'm not.
They were able to have an actual conversation with you.
And I was curious. I wanted to
Yeah.
ask questions. I was very curious, and I asked a lot of questions. And some people didn't like that, but that was the only way that I could understand, is by asking. And
I have a son that's that way.
Yeah.
My youngest is that way. When you sit and talk with him, you're like, man, this kid is in 6th grade, but you'd think he is in college,
Right.
because of the knowledge that he has and how articulate he is, and the depth of the conversation will go, but it's just to sit down and talk to him.
to feel heard.
Yeah.
I think that's why I like talking to adults,
Right.
was because I was so misunderstood. Now, I had a great relationship with my family. My family were my number one supporters, but others outside of my family, I just wanted to be heard and understood subconsciously, because don't we all?
Right.
And I just was gravitating towards these things. So, and that was the beginning. You know, in 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade were the same. Again, elementary school wasn't as bad. Then middle school was when everything just hit the fan. And
What was your biggest struggle in middle school?
I think it got to the point of where I was so behind that I gave up, and I became a behavioral issue
Right.
for good reason. I mean, no one understood why. The school was sitting down with my parents, and they were like, the school even gave up. They said to my parents, we don't know what to do with your son because he is not changing his behavior. Is it my behavior, or is it the way that they're teaching me?
Right.
Because let's be honest, I feel like if you're inspired, you're given the attention, and it wasn't happening. So my parents ended up pulling me out of school, without a plan, actually, because they were just like, our son this is toxic, and I think it's important that those watching this to understand that there's many ways to go about this, right? Some may not be able to pull their kid out of school.
Right.
And I want to acknowledge that, because there's families that can do that, that may not be able to do that, or some that can or just don't know what to do after. At the end of the day, if our child isn't happy, if our child is full of those things, fear, anxiety, and stress, we have to rethink everything. And that may mean, and also knowing that the path isn't going to be like some other your friends. And that's something else that my parents, we were very transparent in that conversation. So,
Well, so when we look at, you know, the tagline in our show is to become a better partner in education.
right,
So we have partnerships. We have the administrations at the district level. We have the administration at the school level. And we have the teachers, and then the parents and students. We're all in our silos. Mm-hmm. We have to be partners.
right,
We have to do what is best, not for us, but for the child.
right,
The child has to be the center of all decisions being made.
right,
And we have to listen to each other with the intent to make sure that that child gets the support that they need and that they can be the best version of themselves.
right,
And what we have a lot of times is it is a complete breakdown of communication, because one side of the table sits back and this is a generality, and I know it's not correct to paint everybody with this brush, and I'm not, because I've worked with a lot of really good administrators and teachers and special ed directors. But when one side stops listening, the conversation is over, and that's where the fight begins.
I mean, just look at our modern day political system. No one's talking to each other.
Right.
Communication. This is what I have a huge passion for. Ironically, was told on my IEPs And many times that I would always struggle with this, but it's my biggest passion, is because if we can't communicate, you have $1 million business idea. If you can't communicate that or market it, you have no business. It's like the same thing.
Right.
If you can't communicate the way you learn best to those who don't understand, it's going to be very hard to get to move forward in feeling confident doing so. And it's going to be you versus them instead of you and them.
Right.
And I completely agree with the importance of, look, I always tell, families I work with, bring your kids to parent-teacher conferences, because that teaches them that the parents are not the messengers, they're the facilitators, because it's between it's the three-way communication channel.
Right.
And that is the one thing that I highly suggest. And that also makes it so that, when I was younger, that allowed me to understand and take ownership and responsibility and hear some tough love, but also be able to voice my own feedback.
Right.
And that forms a relationship between Jake and the teacher instead of Jake versus the teacher, because I don't know what the conversations are happening. Mm-hmm. Then my parents will change the conversation. So that taught me, by the way, I didn't know this until college, and this is in middle school. But what happened was that because it got me comfortable with authority in a way of where I can express and build relationship, that allowed me to go to a mainstream university without an academic support program that only had a center. And I went to 2 colleges, and I had some professors that were some of the worst ranked, made kids cry. But I had some of the best relationships with them because every semester I sat down with them and told them exactly how I learned, then said, what can we do to be a team? First of all, this is something that they're not used to, of a student coming in and sharing that with them. But imagine that's where I learned that from, just by sitting in parent-teacher conferences in middle school. And I think for the parents that are watching this too, look, this, and I'm also curious about your feedback too, is that when our kids are in, either just getting diagnosed or in the early phases of middle school or maybe even high school, the path seems foggy, right? Where is this child going to end up? Are they going to go to college? What's high school even going to look like? I don't know. And that's uncomfortable if we don't know, right? But knowing that whatever happens in that next step, right, looking at it from the moment right now is the most important piece, because it's gonna work, and whatever happens. But if we're present, that's honestly the most important thing.
So I have a different way of looking at stuff like this. I've been in many discussions with teachers where they're telling me that they are we can't give that accommodation because you don't get that at your job, or you're not going to get that accommodation in college. You won't get that later in life. And it always brings me back to, I'm not worried about later in life. I'm worried about right now. We're in the now. What are we doing today to lessen the effects, educational effects, psychological effects, mental effects, all of it? What are we doing today to lessen those?
Right.
Don't worry about later.
Right.
Let's do today.
Right.
We'll do tomorrow, but we got to worry about today.
Right.
Baby steps. And when you have a child that already feels worthless, because, you can tell me if you believe this or you think the same thing. I say, we can't lie to ourselves. We can go out there and say that we're not effective. And that was my thing. I always wanted to act tough. Well, it doesn't bother me. I don't care. This, that, and the other.
Right.
But when I lay my head down on the pillow at night, the only person I'm with is myself. I can't lie to myself. I'm my own biggest bully.
Absolutely.
Right? I can't lie to myself enough to believe it.
Right.
I don't need anybody else to tell me how stupid I am, because I'll tell myself that.
You know, I used to compete competitively in triathlons, and I found that through running. But what I learned, I mean, you're so spot on with this, because you can tell yourself something, and the mind is so powerful. We were just talking about that. You can think your way to, I mean, your mind can save you or kill you. So if you go to bed every night telling yourself that you can't do this, you're not good enough, you end up believing it, and it becomes reality. I'm a huge believer in this.
Mm-hmm.
So I absolutely agree. And I think there's a pro and con to knowing your strengths and weaknesses. Because when you know your weaknesses and you know that those are your weaknesses, look, I've known for so long that math is going to be really hard for me. And look, I have my own business, and there's percentages, there's financial literacy, but because I never had a motivation to want to learn. That's key. Motivation to want to learn it, because I knew this was a weakness of mine, that it took me a lot longer to understand some of this, the basic foundations of it. Because I kept telling myself that, exactly what you're saying. I believed my own lie.
Mm-hmm. You believe the lie.
I believed the lie.
So, there's the other piece of this is you were talking about being a marathon runner.
Triathlon.
A triathlon, sorry.
Marathon one day. I'm getting there.
Well, maybe you can come run the marathon when we go do that with. I've talked myself into running a marathon, and I'm just gonna have to do it. I'm one of those that if I'm challenged, I'll do it. So I challenged myself through our last guest. So
Stephen, it's funny. We talk about mental. It's human beings are born to run. Like, that's how we survive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's 90% mental, which is exactly what we're talking about here.
Right.
Because we tell ourselves, oh, I'm not really, this is just, it's running, it's painful. But all of a sudden, when we do it again, forming this new habit, it becomes easier and easier and easier.
I always used to make the joke that I learned to fight so I don't have to run.
Yeah. Well, it's the same mental strength.
Yeah,
It's fighting
it is.
mentality.
It is. So, I mean, my ADD kicked in. I can't even think where I was going with that. So we were talking about running. We were talking about believing the lie, right? However, if we don't know that there's anything else or another way, if we don't know that, hey, at mile 10, you're going to start having this pain, but at mile 11, it's going to go away. So if you push through it, you're okay.
Right.
Or, man, I suck at math so bad, I can never learn math. But somebody hasn't shown you the appropriate way to get you to understand math. And then you become the math genius that you're supposed to be.
Right.
I mean, that to me is more important, that we reach these kids, we reach them where they're at. And we talk about weaknesses. A weakness is just an area to improve.
It's a challenge.
It's a challenge.
Let's call it a challenge.
Well, it's okay to have weaknesses. We
Yeah.
all have weaknesses, right? But that's just something we can improve on.
Right.
If we all walked around as Superman, we would all be boring. Somebody is always going to be bigger, faster, stronger. But we got to look at ourselves and challenge ourselves inside ourselves every day. What can I change? What can I make better? How can I make a better version of myself?
Right.
Go ahead.
I'm going to totally draw on this analogy you just used with Superman for a second. Because Superman isn't his name. It's Clark Kent.
Right.
It's Clark Kent, who, by the way, when he was a boy, was misunderstood by society, labeled for being different. His parents didn't know how to communicate to him. He was bullied. He was isolated. He felt alone because no one understood him because he was different. He wanted to be like everyone else. He had to go down this whole path of self-discovery. Boom, found himself in the Arctic cave, put on the cape. When he embraced himself, key word, that's when Clark Kent became Superman, because he embraced what his truest abilities are. That's why I believe superhero movies are relatable. You can watch it and your son can watch it. You'll both love it and both have different takeaways. But at the end of the day, it's Clark Kent, which is why we hear about these great LD, success stories like Richard Branson, where Richard Branson was labeled a stupid schoolboy in school also, but we don't know him or think of him as that. We only see him for his success. At the end of the day, all of us now, we're in the adversity now, the kids. We are in the same story as some of the greatest dyslexics, LD individuals out there. We're facing it now. So the question is, what did they do? And how can we take some of that and put it into our own way of looking at things?
Right.
Branson built a Virgin Empire, the purple is the colors, because that's what helps him calm down. He knew that, though. And Superman, again, make-believe superhero. We can't shoot lasers out of our eyes, but because he embraced the fact that he's different, that's what made him become Superman. It's not the fact that he can originally fly or shoot lasers.
I mean, that's pretty deep.
Yeah, it's super deep. It's super deep. And if you haven't seen Superman yet, I'm so sorry. I just spoiled it for you. But
You, I want to go back to a topic that we were talking about
Sure.
at lunch today, and we were talking about when you go speak to kids and when I speak to kids, how, and this is a thing I want to get across to the listeners, and hopefully, some of the teachers that we're talking, that are listening to this, and how powerful these emotions are, and that when we're talking to these kids and we're hearing these stories, you can absolutely take yourself back and put yourself right in that position.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you transport yourself from being a 46-year-old man to 11-year-old boy. And you know exactly what that kid is thinking, he's feeling, his self-worth. That's what makes it all worth it.
Absolutely.
I mean, I would do it for free all day long, just to make sure a kid, a child, a parent, grandparents know that, hey, there is light on the other side. You're actually standing in the light. You're standing in the light, but it's complete blackness.
Right.
Take my hand, let's go. I'll walk back through the tunnel. Let's go. I don't want you here. I want you to move forward.
Right.
Don't allow your children to believe the lie. You don't believe the lie because there's more information out there. Never stop searching for that information. I mean, think about, you talked about Einstein. What if he failed one time or two times or three times and then just goes, you know what? That's it. I'm done.
Right.
You never stop searching. You never stop trying to become the better version of yourself.
Right. Right.
That's not to say don't love yourself, but we can always be better. Never be okay with just being okay.
Right. But I think there's there's a piece to that too, where I think if we catch ourselves chasing versus improving. So there's a lot of, I was like this for a little period of my life too, where I misunderstood what that meant. And I found myself chasing whatever success means. Because you go on social media for 2 seconds and you see what happiness should be versus where you are. And that's not reality.
Right.
So, and that's a big issue too, is where is this confidence? How do you develop this confidence in your own confidence versus a confidence of you putting on a mask, trying to be what society, what the latest trend is. It's funny, when I saw Heelys that came out for the first time, this kid was like floating through the hallways and I was like, what's going on? I want to get that. All of a sudden, half the school had Heelys.
Right. But it's not chasing. I understand what you're saying, right? But I don't look at it as chasing to want to be better for myself.
Right.
I don't care what you think about me. Because at the end of the day, when I lay my head down on my pillow, I'm the only person I have to worry about.
Right.
But now being a father, of course, I have my family. Right. But at the end of the day, when I go to sleep,
it's you.
It's me.
It's you.
And I know what areas that I need to improve on.
Right.
I'm not talking about I've got to look like this person or that person. I've got to be as smart as Jake. But I know what I need to do.
Right.
I know where my weaknesses are, and I'm going to embrace them and make sure that I figure out, is there something I can do about them?
Right. And that's a big distinction too, by the way.
Hey, my wife and I had this conversation. When we first got married, we would stress out about, or she would start stressing out about stuff back and forth, right? And I always look at her and I go, let me ask you a question. Can you do anything about what you're stressing about? Can you do anything about it today, right now? She goes, no. I said, then let it go.
Right.
If you can't fix it right now, why are you allowing it to consume 100% of you? Let it go. Let's move forward. That's not saying you're never going to revisit it. But if you can't do anything about it right now, you can't do anything about it.
Right.
Don't allow it to consume you.
I really like that. I think to get to that point, right? Because that helps. That's a matter of understanding who you are as a learner, who you are as an individual, and what are your strengths and weaknesses. And a lot of what I work on with kids is taking that a step further, which is to identify the foundation of self-confidence. And that's an environment where we're in control, right? You had martial arts. I had model trains, which I still work on. And I started that when I was in 5th grade. But those outlets where I knew that this is what I loved. Now, in the moment when I was in 5th grade, I just did it subconsciously. But looking back, I realized that this was the thing that I needed. The only place in the world where I was in control at the lowest point of my life. It saved my life, the outlet. And I think it's critical to understand the foundation of this and to not understand, oh, I like martial arts or, oh, I like model trains, but why do I like model trains? Why do I like to run? Why do I like martial arts? Or if it's art or music or whatever that is, even if it's a favorite class like history or math. Why? Because that's going to help shape like beneath the surface where that's going to be. So,
I mean, what's great is you could get to the point where you recharge.
right.
And that's what we tend to not have, is we tend to not have areas, and the outlet is one of the things, right, that allow us to not have to be on point all the time. And when you have that learning disability and you're constantly faced with it, when you go to that outlet, when you go to that running, you go to the trains, you go to martial arts, football, singing, whatever it is, at that point, you're the best at whatever your outlet is.
Right.
You're able to recharge your batteries to
Right.
allow you to keep moving forward.
That is the key, because to understand that will help us know the strengths and weaknesses, know, okay, the not lying to myself. And why? Because I know I'm really good at these things. Sure, my friends are much farther at me than reading, but I know I have this superpower, which is my ability to take what's in my imagination and translate it into a work of art or through music. I don't know how to read music, but I'm an auditory learner. So therefore, I take what's in my mind, translate it through sound. So what you hear is my imagination.
That's
Super
awesome.
deep, super
Yep.
deep. But I know this is what I need. And I want kids to understand this earlier. I wish I knew this when I was in middle school,
Absolutely.
because then whenever I would have the pain in my stomach, instead of getting angry and not knowing what to do with with these feelings or emotions, I would just go downstairs. I would go downstairs and I did that subconsciously, but knowing that I need to do this
Right.
was big.
That is, when you as a child can understand that and embrace it, it's huge, because you're removing yourself from the trauma and allowing yourself the ability to recharge.
Right.
So we can't be on 100% of the time.
Right.
And that's what we're asking a lot of these kids to do.
Absolutely.
Well, we're just about out of time.
Time
man,
flies.
I want to have you back on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I've really enjoyed, our talk at lunch, and then, the talk right now. I love to hear people of two completely different backgrounds, from different ages, different backgrounds, different parts of the country, but our stories are exactly the same.
Isn't that wild?
And that's why we do what we do, because all of our stories are the same. So that's our driving force.
Yeah. There's so much power in sharing. I mean, like what we were saying earlier, if we have the chance to do it, because you don't know who's listening, but also who you're going to impact. And it's going to help you, but it's going to help someone else.
That's right. Well, our guest on Thursday, Eric, from Stand Up LD, I told him the very first seminar or talk that I went to was at his location. When I was trying to figure out which way do I go, which way is the battle, point me out. And he was the first, parent meeting that I ever went to.
Wow.
I told him, I said, you had a hand in Empower Dyslexia without him ever knowing that he did. So you never know. So, well, hopefully you'll come back.
Oh, we'll be back. We'll be back.
Awesome. So, at the end of our show, we always talk about how do we get the process started? When should I get my child tested? If you're having the thought process of when do I get my child tested, the answer is now. Don't wait. Do it now. We have templates on our website, www.empowereddyslexia.info, that you can download, fill them out, turn them into your campus counselor to get the testing process started. You'll be happy to understand exactly what's going on with your child. Your child will be happy because they are now receiving the type of help that they needed all along, they've been begging for. So, the time is now. And if you need help, please reach out to us. You can email us at show@empowereddyslexia.info. You can go to our website. There's a link on our website. Anything that we can do to help, we're here for it. I want to thank our sponsors, because this is made possible for season 2 by all of our great sponsors: Learning Ally, Impact Dyslexia, and 3 Dudes Design. So we'll see you again next Thursday at 11, where we're live. And until then, we'll see you there.